Have you ever looked at recent U.S. military actions and thought, something feels a little different here? From these very targeted strikes to some pretty bold geopolitical moves, some folks are seeing more than just isolated events. They see a pattern, maybe even a whole new doctrine. So, is there really a Trump way of war? Let's dive into one prominent theory that says, absolutely, there is.
So that's the big question, right? Are these actions just random, case-by-case decisions, or do they actually follow some kind of coherent script? Well, according to commentator Victor Davis Hanson, whose analysis we're digging into today, it's not random at all. He argues there's a very clear and very deliberate pattern at play.
So here's our roadmap for today. We're going to break down what Victor Davis Hanson calls the Trump way of war. We'll look at what he thinks the motivations are, what the unique tactics look like, what this approach rejects from the past, the kind of powerful message it's trying to send, and then we'll ask, is this really a whole new blueprint for conflict? All right, so first things first, what exactly is this doctrine we're talking about? Before we jump into all the specifics, let's just get a really clear definition on the table, based on Hanson's framework. Okay, so here's how Hanson defines it. A consistent pattern of punitive and preemptive military actions. You see the key words there, punitive and preemptive. In his view, this isn't about reacting to something that's already happened. It's about acting first, for very specific reasons and with very specific methods. It's definitely not conventional warfare as we've come to know it. So if this is a new way of doing things, what's the driving force behind it? Well, according to the analysis we're looking at, the motivation isn't really about shaping the future. It's actually deeply, deeply rooted in the past.
Hanson puts it about as bluntly as you can. These are wars of reckoning. The whole idea, the core of his theory, is that this strategy is all about settling old scores. It's about addressing these long-standing grievances that, in his view, have just been left to fester for way too long.
Let's take Iran as a prime example. Hanson's analysis points to this long list of what he sees as unresolved issues. Going all the way back to the taking of American hostages, to using proxies to kill Americans. So from this perspective, any recent actions are about one thing and one thing only, evening up the score.
And you see a pretty similar story unfolding in Hanson's analysis of Venezuela. He brings up grievances like the Maduro regime allegedly working with cartels and just generally destabilizing the entire region. So in this framework, any action taken is framed as this long overdue move to stop what he calls a Castroite revolution.
And it's not just the usual adversaries. Even a country like Panama isn't off the hook in this analysis. The old score here is all about geostrategy. Hanson argues the goal is to pressure Panama to stop allowing Chinese strategic influence right on the canal, which he sees as a direct threat to U.S. interests.
Okay, so we've covered the why, this idea of settling old scores. Now let's get into the how. What are the specific tactics that, according to this theory, make this whole doctrine so different?
A core tactic, maybe the most important one, is what Hanson calls the top-down attack. So instead of these massive invasions that hit infrastructure and troops and impact the entire population, this strategy goes directly after the leaders. Think Soleimani, think al-Baghdadi, think Maduro. The message it's trying to send is really clear. The people aren't the target, their leaders are. And then there's this other key tactic described. Let's call it the negotiate and strike approach. The analysis points out that a lot of these military actions happen while negotiations are supposedly going on. Now, this is said to do two things. One, it helps quiet the criticism that the strikes are just totally out of the blue. And two, it gives the U.S. total control over when the conflict starts, and this is crucial, when it ends.
Now, it's just as important to understand what this doctrine is as it is to understand what it is not. And according to this analysis, it is a complete, total rejection of the foreign policy norms that we've seen for the last few decades.
This quote from Hanson, it's provocative for sure, but it illustrates a central point he's making. This doctrine completely gets rid of any idea of exporting American culture or values. The goal is absolutely not to remake other countries in America's image.
So, what's being thrown out? According to this theory, no more nation building. No more of these so-called forever optional wars. No massive deployments of ground troops, unless it's a real emergency. And no more waiting around for permission from international bodies like the UN or NATO, which from this point of view just clog up the process.
Okay, so if this doctrine isn't about exporting values or building nations, then what is the point? Well, according to Hanson, it's all about sending a powerful, absolutely unmistakable message to the entire world.
And we're not just talking about an abstract message here. We're talking about making it tangible. Look at this number, 105,000 tons.
That's the displacement of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the biggest warship in history, and it's being actively showcased. The whole point is to make American military power visible and completely undeniable.
Hanson points to what happened with Iran as the textbook case. U.S. assets literally created a perimeter from every single direction you can think of. The intent, he argues, is a global display, a demonstration that only the United States has this kind of hardware and this kind of reach. Iran is completely boxed in, and the rest of the world is meant to sit up and take notice.
So ultimately, it all comes down to this. In Hanson's view, this entire strategy operates on one thing: clearly defined, unapologetic American self-interest. The goal isn't to be the world's policeman, it's to protect American assets, allies, and citizens from anyone who has harmed them in the past. Period. So, when you put all these pieces together, the motivation to settle old scores, these top-down tactics, the rejection of forever wars, and this unapologetic messaging, what does it all really add up to?
And here's the final thesis from Victor Davis Hanson. He says that, look, the fundamental nature of war itself, human conflict, that never changes. But how you fight a war, the tactics, the strategy, that does change. And in his view, no one has changed it more in the modern era than Donald Trump.
So this analysis presents a pretty radical break from traditional foreign policy, and it really challenges how we think about conflict. And that leaves us with one final, and I think crucial question to think about. Whether you agree with this theory or not, what does this new blueprint for conflict actually mean for the future of global stability?